The dust kicked up in angry clouds as Clara Jenkins watched the banker's carriage disappear down the rutted road, taking with it the last shred of hope she had been clinging to since her father died 3 months ago. She stood on the porch of the farmhouse her grandfather had built in 1851, her fingers gripping the foreclosure notice so tightly the paper crumpled in her fist. And for the first time since she was a little girl, she let herself cry. The year was 1879, and at 23 years old, Clara was about to lose everything her family had worked for in Beaver, Utah. The farm sprawled across 80 acres of hard-won land, bordered by the Beaver River on one side and rolling hills on the other. Her father had spent 20 years turning the stubborn earth into productive fields, raising cattle, and building a life for his family. When the fever took him and her mother within a week of each other, Clara had been determined to keep their legacy alive. But determination meant nothing to Harold Pemberton, the thin-lipped banker who had just informed her that unless she paid the $600 owed by Friday, 4 days from now, the property would be seized and auctioned. $600 might as well have been $6,000. The drought the previous summer had decimated the crops. Half the cattle had to be sold just to buy feed for the rest through winter. Clara had sold her mother's jewelry, her father's pocket watch, everything of value except the land itself. She had been scraping by, making minimum payments, but Pemberton had apparently lost patience. Or more likely, someone had offered him a tidy sum to accelerate the foreclosure so they could snap up prime land at auction prices. Clara walked back into the house, her boots echoing on the wooden floors her father had laid with such care. The furniture was sparse now, most of it sold. The parlor that had once been filled with her mother's laughter and the warm glow of oil lamps on family gatherings now stood nearly empty. She moved to the kitchen and sat at the old oak table, spreading the foreclosure notice flat before her. The words swam in her vision. Legal terminology that boiled down to a simple, brutal fact. She had failed. She had tried so hard, working from dawn until long after dark, her hands rough and calloused, her back aching from labor that would have broken most city women. She had learned to mend fences, treat sick cattle, even handle a rifle well enough to protect the livestock from coyotes. None of it had been enough. A knock at the door startled her from her misery. Clara wiped her eyes quickly, straightening her spine. She would not let anyone see her defeated, not yet. When she opened the door, she found her neighbor, Thomas Wright, hat in hand, his weathered face creased with concern. "Miss Jenkins, I heard about Pemberton's visit," he said quietly. "I wanted to see if there was anything my family could do." Clara managed a weak smile. Thomas and his wife had been kind to her since her parents passed, bringing over food, helping with heavy work when they could spare the hands. But they had 6 children and their own struggles. "That is kind of you, Thomas, but I will manage somehow," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. Thomas shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Clara, I know it ain't my business, but $600 in 4 days, that's impossible. Have you considered that maybe it's time to let go? You could stay with us for a while, figure out what comes next." The suggestion, though well-meaning, felt like a knife between her ribs. Let go. Give up her family's land, her history, her home. Become a charity case, dependent on the kindness of others. "I appreciate the offer, but I am not ready to surrender yet," Clara said firmly. Thomas nodded slowly. "You got your daddy's stubborn streak, that's for sure. But Clara, sometimes holding on too tight just causes more pain. You think on it, you hear." After he left, Clara returned to the table and forced herself to think practically. For days, she mentally inventoried everything she still owned. The farm equipment was mostly worn out. The remaining cattle would fetch maybe $200 if she could find a buyer quickly. The chickens, the old plow horse, the wagon, all of it together would not come close to $600. She could try to borrow the money, but from whom? Every rancher and farmer in the territory was struggling. The few who had money to spare were more likely to wait and bid on her property at auction, getting it for a fraction of its worth. That night, Clara barely slept. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the house settle and creak, imagining it belonging to someone else. She thought about her father teaching her to ride when she was 6, her mother singing while she kneaded bread in the kitchen, Sunday dinners with neighbors and friends gathered around a table laden with food and laughter. All of it would be lost, becoming nothing more than memories that would fade with time. The next morning, Clara rose before dawn and threw herself into work. If these were her last days on the farm, she would spend them doing what she loved. She fed the animals, mucked out stalls, checked the fences along the southern pasture. The physical labor helped quiet her mind, let her pretend for a few hours that everything was normal. She was mending a section of fence near the main road when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw a rider on a magnificent black stallion. The man sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dusty brown jacket, a hat pulled low over his face. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. Dark hair curling at his collar, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He slowed his horse as he neared her, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "Afternoon, madam. This the Jenkins place." Clara straightened, wiping her hands on her work pants. She had long since stopped wearing skirts for farm labor, much to the disapproval of the church ladies in town. "It is. Can I help you with something?" The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, moving with the easy grace of a man who spent more time in the saddle than on foot. Up close, he was even more striking, perhaps 27 or 28, with features that might have been carved from granite and eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained composure. "Name is Samuel Zachary," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "I have been traveling through from Wyoming, heard in town that this place might be coming up for auction. Thought I would take a look at it before Friday." Clara felt her cheeks flush with humiliation. Already people were circling like vultures, anticipating her failure. "The auction has not happened yet," she said stiffly. "The property is still mine for 4 more days." Samuel studied her for a long moment, and she met his gaze with as much dignity as she could muster. Let him see that she would not go down without a fight. "My apologies, Miss Jenkins. I did not mean any disrespect," he said, and to her surprise he sounded sincere. "It is a fine piece of land. Your family has done well with it." "My family built everything here from nothing," Clara said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "My grandfather broke this land, my father improved it, and I have tried my best to honor their work." "I can see that," Samuel said quietly, his eyes moving over the well-maintained fences, the neat barn, the fields that showed evidence of careful stewardship despite the hardships. "Mind if I water my horse at your well?" Clara nodded, and he led the stallion toward the barn. She watched him go, confused by the mix of anger and something else she could not quite identify stirring in her chest. He moved like he belonged in this landscape, part of the rugged country itself. Against her better judgment, she followed him to the barn. Samuel was drawing water from the well, offering it to his horse in the wooden bucket. The stallion drank deeply, and Samuel ran a hand along its neck with obvious affection. "He is beautiful," Clara said despite herself. "Name is Midnight. Raised him from a colt," Samuel said. "He has carried me through more scrapes than I can count." "You are a long way from Wyoming," Clara observed. Samuel glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "I have been working cattle drives, ranches, wherever the work takes me. Saved up enough to maybe buy some land, settle down somewhere. Utah seems as good a place as any." "It is hard country," Clara said. "Beautiful but unforgiving." "Best things usually are," Samuel replied. They stood in silence for a moment, and Clara found herself studying him covertly. There was something about him that drew her attention, beyond his obvious physical appeal. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but without arrogance. His hands, she noticed, were scarred and calloused from hard work, not soft like the bankers or the speculators who had never done an honest day's labor. "Why this place in particular?" Clara asked. "There is plenty of land in the territory." Samuel met her eyes. "Like I said, it is well maintained. Shows that whoever worked it cared about it, did not just try to squeeze every drop of profit and move on. That kind of stewardship is rare." Clara felt a lump forming in her throat. "My father always said the land would take care of you if you took care of it first." "Smart man," Samuel said. "He was," Clara whispered. "I wish he was here now." The words came out before she could stop them, and she turned away quickly, mortified at showing weakness to a stranger. But Samuel did not mock her or offer empty platitudes. "I lost my own father when I was 19, he said quietly. "Threw me into running our ranch before I was ready. I understand what that weight feels like." Clara turned back to face him. "What happened to your ranch?" A shadow crossed Samuel's face. "Drought took most of the herd 3 years back. We had borrowed heavy to expand, and when the cattle died, we could not pay the notes. Bank took it all. My mother went to live with my sister in Denver. I have been working other people's land ever since, saving every penny to get another chance." "I am sorry," Clara said, and meant it. Here was someone who truly understood her situation. Samuel shrugged. "It is the way of things sometimes, but I learned from it. This time I will do it different. Buy outright, no debt, build slow and steady." The irony was not lost on Clara. This man who had lost his own family land was now in a position to buy hers. The unfairness of it all made her want to scream, but she kept her composure. "I should get back to work," she said. "You are welcome to look around, I suppose. Everyone else will be soon enough anyway." She started to walk away, but Samuel's voice stopped her. "Miss Jenkins, can I ask you something?" Clara turned. "What? If you had the money to pay off the debt, would you stay? Would you keep fighting to hold this place?" The question caught her off guard. "Of course I would. This is my home, my family's legacy. I would do anything to keep it." Samuel nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he was thinking. "I believe you would." He mounted his horse and rode away without another word, leaving Clara standing in the barnyard, confused and unsettled by the encounter. That evening, Clara sat at her table with a piece of paper and a pencil, trying one more time to find a solution that did not exist. She added and subtracted, calculated and recalculated, but the numbers never changed. She was $150 short even if she sold everything she owned. The hopelessness threatened to swallow her whole. She thought about Zachary and his storm-colored eyes. He seemed like a decent man, someone who would probably treat the land with respect. But it would still be him here instead of her, living in her house, working her fields, erasing the Jenkins family from this place as surely as wind erased footprints from dust. The next morning brought no revelations, only another day closer to losing everything. Clara was in the barn, brushing down her old mare, when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked out to see Zachary driving a buckboard, a canvas-wrapped bundle in the back. Her heart sank. Had he brought tools and supplies already? So confident that he would win the auction, Samuel climbed down from the wagon and approached the barn. Today he had shaved, and Clara could see he was even younger than she had first thought, maybe 26 at most. His eyes found hers, and she was struck again by their intensity. "Miss Jenkins, I need to speak with you," he said. "About what? Have you come to take measurements for new furniture?" Clara could not keep the bitterness from her voice. Samuel flinched slightly. "I deserve that, I suppose. But no. I went to see Mr. Pemberton this morning." Clara's hand tightened on the brush. "Why would you do that?" "I paid off your debt," Samuel said simply. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Clara grabbed the stall door for support, sure she had misheard. "You did what?" $600 plus the interest and fees. I paid it all. The farm is yours, free and clear." Clara's mind reeled. This made no sense. Why would you do that?" Samuel took a step closer, his expression earnest. "Because I could see what this place means to you. Because I remember what it felt like to lose my family's land, and I would not wish that on anyone. Because you deserve a chance to keep fighting for what is yours." "But you said you had been saving for years to buy land," Clara protested. "You just gave away your dream for a stranger." "Maybe I found a different dream," Samuel said quietly. Clara shook her head, trying to process this. "I do not understand. What do you want from me? There has to be something. Nobody gives away that kind of money for nothing." Samuel was silent for a long moment, and Clara could see him gathering courage for something. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his nervousness. "I want to ask you one question," he said. "And I want you to think hard before you answer, because it is going to sound crazy and I know it." "What question?" Clara whispered. Samuel took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Clara's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Of all the things she had been expecting, that was not even on the list. "Marry you? I do not even know you. We met yesterday." "I know," Samuel said quickly. "I know it is insane, but hear me out, please." Clara could not form words, so she just nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. "I have been alone for 3 years, working from ranch to ranch, saving every penny for a fresh start," Samuel began. "I have seen a lot of land in my travels, a lot of operations. When I rode past this place yesterday and saw you fixing that fence, saw how well maintained everything was despite your hardships, I knew this was special. Then I talked to people in town, heard about what happened to your parents, how you have been fighting alone to keep this place going. Every person I talked to had nothing but respect for your determination and your character." He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. "I went back to my hotel room and I could not stop thinking about you standing there, telling me this was your home. I saw myself 3 years ago, watching strangers carry my father's furniture out of our house. I saw my mother crying as we packed up the family photographs, and I thought about how different things might have been if someone had given us a chance." Clara listened, her emotions churning. This was madness, absolute madness, but she could not deny the sincerity in his voice. "I am not a rich man, but I am a hard worker," Samuel continued. "I know cattle, crops, land management. I could help you run this place, make it profitable again. We could be partners in that, equals. And maybe, over time, it could become something more. Or maybe it stays a business arrangement, I do not know. But I do know that I would rather invest my savings in building something real with someone who cares as much as you do than buying land at auction and working it alone." "You want to marry me for my farm," Clara said, trying to wrap her mind around it. "No," Samuel said firmly. "If I wanted the farm, I could have just waited for the auction and bought it for half what I paid Pemberton. I am asking you to marry me because in one conversation, you impressed me more than any woman I have ever met. Because I see strength and integrity and passion in you. Because I am tired of being alone, and I think maybe you are too. Because I believe we could build something good together if you are willing to take a chance." Clara walked out of the barn, needing air, needing space to think. This was impossible. You did not marry strangers. But then again, plenty of marriages started as arrangements, business deals, partnerships that grew into affection over time. And what was her alternative? Stay alone on the farm, struggling until the next drought or disaster pushed her under. She was practical enough to know that running this operation alone was barely sustainable. Samuel followed her out but kept his distance, giving her room. "I am not asking you to love me," he said quietly. "I am just asking you to give us both a chance at the lives we want. You get to keep your family's legacy. I get a home and a partner. We work together, build together, see where it leads." "This is insane," Clara said, but even as she spoke, her practical mind was examining the angles. A partner, someone to share the burden of the work. Someone with experience and knowledge. Someone who had already proven he was willing to sacrifice for her without demanding anything in return except the chance to be part of something. "Probably," Samuel agreed. "But is it any more insane than losing everything because you are too proud to accept help?" That stung because it was true. Clara turned to face him fully, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She saw only honesty and hope, tinged with the same uncertainty she was feeling. "I need time to think," she said. Samuel nodded. "That is fair. But Miss Jenkins, the deal I made with Pemberton is that he has the money and your debt is cleared. That happened this morning. I am not holding that over you. Whether you say yes or no to my question, the farm is yours free and clear. I will not take that back no matter what you decide." Clara stared at him. "You are serious." "Completely. My offer of marriage is separate from the debt payment. I need you to understand that. I am not trying to buy you or trap you into anything." "Then you are either the noblest man I have ever met or the stupidest," Clara said bluntly. A small smile tugged at Samuel's lips. "Probably a bit of both, but I mean what I say. I will ride back to town, stay at the hotel. You think about it. If you want to talk more, I will be at the Beaver Hotel through the end of the week. If I do not hear from you by Friday, I will head back to Wyoming and you will never see me again." He climbed onto his horse, tipped his hat to her and rode away, leaving Clara standing in front of her barn, her mind spinning with impossible possibilities. That night, Clara could not sleep at all. She paced the house, sat at the table, walked out onto the porch to stare at the stars. Zachary had paid her debt and asked for nothing in return except the chance to court her, essentially. No, not even court her in the traditional sense. He had proposed marriage outright, but without demanding love or devotion, only partnership. She forced herself to think about it logically. What did she know about him? He was from Wyoming, had lost his family's ranch, worked cattle drives and various ranches, saved his money. He was polite, well-spoken, obviously educated beyond just ranch work. People in town had pointed him to her place, which meant he had asked questions, done research. He could have just shown up at the auction and bought the land outright for less money, but instead he had paid her full debt to save her the humiliation of foreclosure. His eyes had been honest when he looked at her. She had become a good judge of character over the years, dealing with ranch hands, traders, and the occasional swindler. Samuel did not have the shifty, calculating look of someone running a con. He seemed genuine, if absolutely crazy. Clara walked to her father's old desk and pulled out the family Bible. Inside were records of births, marriages, and deaths going back 3 generations. Her grandparents had met on a wagon train west, barely knew each other when they wed in a quick ceremony at Fort Bridger. They had built a life together and by all accounts had been deeply in love by the end. Her own parents had had a slightly more conventional courtship, but even they had known each other less than 6 months before marrying. Was what Samuel proposed really so different? At least he was being honest about his intentions, laying out the terms clearly. And he had already proven himself trustworthy by paying her debt with no strings attached. The next day, Clara rode into Beaver. The town was small, just a main street with a general store, saloon, hotel, church, and a handful of other businesses. People greeted her as she passed, some with sympathy in their eyes. News of foreclosures traveled fast in small communities. She tied her horse outside the hotel and stood there for a moment, gathering her courage. This was madness. She was about to walk into a hotel and talk marriage with a man she had met twice. What would people think? What would they say? Then again, what did it matter? If she said no and struggled on alone, people would pity her. If she said yes and took a husband who could help her run the farm, people would gossip. Either way, there would be talk. She might as well give them something interesting to discuss. Clara walked into the hotel and approached the desk clerk, a young man named Billy who had gone to school with her brother before he died of scarlet fever at age 12. "Hi, Clara," Billy said. "What brings you to town?" "I need to see Samuel Zachary. What room is he in?" Billy's eyebrows rose slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. "Room 7, upstairs to the left." Clara climbed the narrow stairs, her heart pounding. She stood outside room 7 for a full minute before she finally knocked. Samuel opened the door, surprise and hope flashing across his face when he saw her. He was in shirt sleeves, his jacket hung over a chair, and she could see the room behind him was neat and spare, just a bed and a small table with his saddle bags. "Miss Jenkins," he said, "please come in. Or we can talk downstairs in the dining room if you would prefer." "Downstairs," Clara said quickly. Being alone with him in his room would start exactly the kind of talk she did not need. They went down to the small dining room, which was empty mid-morning. Samuel ordered coffee for both of them, and they sat across from each other at a corner table. "I have been thinking about your proposal," Clara said, deciding to be as direct as he had been. "And?" Samuel's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I have questions first." "Lots of them. That is fair. Ask me anything." Clara wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup. "Why are you really doing this? And I want the whole truth, not just the noble parts." Samuel considered this, taking a sip of his coffee. "All right. The whole truth is that I am tired of being alone. I am tired of working other people's land and living out of saddle bags. I am 26 years old and I want a home, a family, something to build and invest in beyond just money. When I saw your place, I saw the possibility of that." He met her eyes steadily. "And when I met you, I saw someone I could respect, someone strong and determined and real. I have known plenty of women in my life, Miss Jenkins. Pretty girls who giggled and flirted, daughters of ranch owners who looked at me like a hired hand beneath their notice, saloon girls looking for a ticket to something better. You are different. You looked me in the eye like an equal, and you did not pretend to be something you are not." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That is because I cannot afford pretense. Life has been too hard for games." "Exactly. And that is what I want in a partner, someone honest, someone tough enough to weather the storms life brings. I think you are that person." "You do not know me," Clara protested. "What if I snore? What if I am terrible at cooking? What if I have a wicked temper?" Samuel smiled slightly. "Do you snore? I have no idea. I sleep alone." "Are you terrible at cooking?" "I am passable at basic meals. Nothing fancy." "I can cook too. I have had to on cattle drives. We will manage." "Do you have a wicked temper?" Clara thought about it honestly. "I have a temper, yes. When things are unjust or wrong, I get angry, but I do not yell or throw things. I get cold and sharp with my words." I can handle cold and sharp, Samuel said. My mother was the same way. It is better than someone who smiles to your face and plots behind your back. Clara studied him over her coffee cup. What about you? What are your flaws? Because everyone has them. Samuel leaned back in his chair. I work too much. I have a hard time relaxing, always think there is something that needs doing. I am stubborn when I think I am right about something. I do not talk much about my feelings, tend to keep things bottled up inside. And I have nightmares sometimes about losing the ranch, wake up in a cold sweat thinking I am back in that moment. His honesty disarmed her. Most men would never admit to nightmares or fear. I have nightmares too, Clara admitted quietly. About my parents dying, about losing the farm. Sometimes I dream I am calling for help and no one can hear me. They sat in silence for a moment, two wounded people recognizing each other's pain. What would you expect from me as a wife? Clara asked. Partnership, Samuel said immediately. I do not want a servant or someone who just cooks and cleans. I want someone who works beside me, makes decisions with me, builds this life with me. I respect what you have accomplished on your own, and I am not here to take that over. I am here to add to it. And if we do not fall in love? Clara pressed. What then? Samuel met her gaze. Then we are business partners who treat each other with respect and kindness. Plenty of marriages work that way. But I will be honest, Clara, I would hope for more. I would hope that working together, building together, might grow into real affection. I am not asking you to love me now. I am asking you to give it a chance to develop. The use of her first name sent a small shiver through her. His voice made it sound almost like a caress. And children? She asked, her cheeks flushing. Would you expect that? Samuel's expression grew serious. Only if and when you wanted that. I will not force myself on you, Clara. If you need time, months or even years, I can wait. I sleep on the floor or in the barn if that makes you more comfortable. This is not about me demanding husbandly rights. This is about building trust first. Clara's last reservation crumbled a bit at that. He was offering her something incredibly rare, respect and patience. I have one more question, she said, and I need you to answer truthfully. Have you been with other women? Do you have children somewhere that you have not mentioned? Samuel shook his head. No children. I have been with women, yes, a couple of times over the years, but never seriously, never someone I cared about. I always knew I wanted to wait for the right person to build a life with. Clara nodded. She appreciated his honesty. I have not been with anyone. Most of the boys I knew growing up saw me as one of them, not as a woman. And after my parents died, there was no time for courting even if anyone had been interested. Then we learned together, Samuel said softly. Clara took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of decision. She could say no, go back to her farm alone, struggle on with the weight of independence and pride. Or she could take this leap into the unknown with a stranger who had shown her more kindness than anyone had in months. If I say yes, Clara began slowly, I need some conditions. Hope flared in Samuel's eyes. Name them. First, the farm stays in my name, legally. I will not risk losing it again if something happens. Agreed. I will have a lawyer draw up papers that protect your ownership. Second, we take time to get to know each other. I am not opposed to this becoming a real marriage in all ways, but I need time. Of course, as much as you need. Third, we are partners in every decision about the farm. I am not going to be ordered around on my own land. I would not have it any other way. Your knowledge of this specific land is far greater than mine. I would be a fool to ignore that. Clara drew a deep breath. Then yes, I will marry you, Samuel Zachary. The smile that broke across Samuel's face transformed him. He had been handsome before, but now he was radiant with joy and relief. He reached across the table and took her hand gently, his calloused palm warm against hers. You will not regret this, Clara. I swear to you, I will do everything in my power to be worthy of your trust." They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the church in Beaver. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her taller frame. Samuel wore a new suit he had bought in town, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothes but undeniably handsome. Thomas Wright and his wife stood as witnesses, along with a handful of neighbors who had known the Jenkins family for years. Reverend Morrison performed the ceremony, his voice solemn as he spoke about the sacred bonds of marriage. When it came time for Samuel to repeat his vows, he looked directly into Clara's eyes and spoke with quiet conviction that made her heart skip. "I, Samuel Zachary, take you, Clara Jenkins, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor you, respect you, work beside you, and protect what we build together. In hardship and in prosperity, in sickness and health, I will be your partner and your friend for all the days of my life." Clara's voice shook slightly as she repeated her own vows, but she got through them. When Reverend Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel leaned in and kissed her gently, briefly, a simple brush of lips that nonetheless sent warmth flooding through her. The neighbors hosted a small reception at the Wright house, with food and fiddle music and dancing. Clara found herself swept into the celebration, women she had known all her life hugging her and wishing her well. There was curiosity in their eyes about the hasty marriage to a stranger, but also genuine happiness for her. Samuel was approached by several of the local ranchers, men sizing up the newcomer who had married the Jenkins girl. Clara watched him handle their questions and comments with easy confidence, neither boastful nor deferential. He spoke knowledgeably about cattle and crops, held his own in the conversations, and slowly she saw the men's attitudes shift from suspicion to cautious approval. As evening fell, Samuel brought their wagon around. Clara said her goodbyes and they began the drive back to the farm. Her farm. Their farm now, she supposed, though the thought still felt strange. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as they rode. Samuel handled the horses with easy competence, and Clara found herself stealing glances at him, her husband. The word felt foreign in her mind. "You are quiet," Samuel observed. "Having second thoughts," Clara shook her head. "No, just trying to make it all feel real. This morning I woke up alone and unmarried. Tonight I have a husband. We can take things as slow as you need," Samuel reminded her. "This does not have to change everything all at once." They arrived at the farmhouse as full dark settled over the land. Samuel helped Clara down from the wagon, his hands firm at her waist, and she was suddenly very aware of being alone with him, of what traditionally happened on wedding nights. Inside the house, Clara lit lamps while Samuel brought in his saddle bags and the few possessions he owned. It was not much: some clothes, a few books, a photograph of his parents in a simple frame. "I will make coffee," Clara said, needing something to do with her hands. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Clara had faced her foreclosure notice less than a week ago. Now everything had changed. "Can I ask you something?" Samuel said. Clara nodded. "When you were fixing that fence the first day I rode up, you looked so fierce and determined." "What were you thinking about?" Clara smiled slightly, remembering. "I was thinking that if these were my last days on the farm, I would spend them taking care of it properly. I was not going to let it fall apart just because I was losing it." "That is what made me certain," Samuel said quietly. "Right then, watching you work with such care on something you thought you were about to lose, that is when I knew you were special." Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "I was terrified. I am still terrified, honestly. Not of you," she added quickly, "but of failing again, of not being enough." Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. "You are enough, Clara, more than enough, And you are not alone anymore. We face things together now." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their childhoods, their families, their dreams. Clara learned that Samuel had wanted to be a teacher when he was young, had loved reading and learning, but ranch life had pulled him in a different direction. He learned that Clara could play the piano, had studied with a music teacher in town until her family could no longer afford the lessons. Finally, exhaustion caught up with them. Clara showed Samuel to the small bedroom that had been her brother's, apologizing for the narrow bed and sparse furnishings. "It is perfect," Samuel assured her. "Better than most of the bunkhouses I have slept in." Clara retired to her own room and changed into her nightgown, her mind whirling. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, aware that just down the hall was a man she had married but barely knew. It should have terrified her more than it did. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm, of rightness. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen to find Samuel cooking breakfast, already dressed for work. "I hope you do not mind," he said, gesturing to the stove. "I am used to early hours." "Not at all," Clara said, touched by the gesture. "I usually just have bread and coffee." They ate together, planning the day's work. There was so much to do: fences to mend, cattle to tend, fields to prepare for planting. Samuel pulled out a small notebook, and they made lists, divided tasks, worked out a system. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. They worked side by side from dawn to dusk, Samuel proving to be as capable as he had claimed. He was strong and tireless, but also willing to listen to Clara's knowledge of the specific challenges of the land. They made decisions together, sometimes disagreeing but always talking through it until they found a solution. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, talking about the day's progress and plans for tomorrow. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. Slowly, Clara felt herself relaxing around him, the initial awkwardness fading into genuine companionship. Samuel never pushed her for more than she was ready to give. He slept in the small bedroom, gave her space, but was always there when she needed help with something heavy or difficult. He fixed things around the house that had been broken for months, repaired the porch steps, mended harnesses and tools. One evening about a month after their wedding, a storm rolled in. Thunder crashed and lightning split the sky, rain pounding on the roof. Clara was in the kitchen cleaning up from dinner when a particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump. She turned to find Samuel watching her with concern. "Are you all right?" "I hate storms," Clara admitted. "Ever since I was little. My brother used to sit with me during bad weather." Without a word, Samuel moved to the parlor and built up the fire. He brought blankets from his room and arranged them on the old sofa that was one of the few pieces of furniture left from her parents' time. "Come, sit with me," he said. "I will keep you company through the storm." Clara settled on the sofa, and Samuel sat beside her, close but not touching. As the storm raged outside, they talked about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about riding out a tornado in Kansas, how terrifying and awe-inspiring it had been. Clara told him about the time she and her brother had gotten lost in a snowstorm and her father had ridden out to find them. At some point, Clara realized she had leaned against Samuel's shoulder. He had put his arm around her, holding her gently. It felt natural, comforting. When she looked up at him, she found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. Something shifted between them in that moment, an awareness that this was becoming more than a business arrangement. "Samuel," she whispered. "Yes, thank you for everything. For saving the farm, for being patient with me, for being here." "There is nowhere else I would rather be," Samuel said softly. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a kiss that asked rather than demanded. Clara kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. When they pulled apart, both were breathing a bit harder. Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Clara," he said quietly. "I know it has only been a month, but I cannot help it. The way you laugh when the new calf does something silly, the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on something, the way you look at this land like it is the most beautiful thing in the world. I see you and I feel like I found what I have been looking for my whole life." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "I think I am falling in love with you too. It scares me how much. I did not think I could feel this way, especially not so fast." "We do not have to rush anything," Samuel assured her. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." But Clara shook her head. "I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of holding back because I might get hurt. You paid my debt and asked for nothing but a chance. You have been nothing but honorable and kind. I want this to be a real marriage, Samuel." "In all ways." She saw the desire flare in his eyes, but also the concern. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel pressured." In answer, Clara kissed him again, this time with more confidence, more passion. Samuel responded in kind, his arms tightening around her, and for the first time in years, Clara felt truly safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally, spiritually. This man who had been a stranger now felt like home. They moved to her bedroom, nervous and eager and tender with each other. Samuel was patient and gentle, aware that this was Clara's first time. There was some awkwardness, some fumbling, but also laughter and whispered reassurances. When they finally came together fully, Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy and relief and connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her bed, Samuel running his fingers through her long hair, Clara tracing the scars on his chest that told stories of a hard life worked outdoors. "I want to tell you something," Samuel said quietly. "When I rode away from Beaver the first time, after paying your debt, I honestly did not think you would say yes to my proposal. I thought I had just thrown away my savings on a foolish gesture for a woman who would think I was insane." "What made you do it then?" Clara asked, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Because it was the right thing to do, and because even if you said no, I could not live with myself knowing I had the power to save your home and did not do it. Some things matter more than money or plans." Clara kissed him softly. "I am so glad you are crazy." "Me too," Samuel said with a smile. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time since her parents died, Clara did not have nightmares. The seasons turned and the farm began to thrive again. With 2 people working it and Samuel's knowledge of efficient ranching practices, they were able to expand the herd and get better yields from the fields. Samuel bought a young bull to improve the breeding stock, and Clara started a larger vegetable garden to sell produce in town. They worked hard, but they also made time for each other. Sunday afternoons became sacred, a time when they would ride out to the river and have picnics, or stay in bed late reading to each other from Samuel's small collection of books. They talked endlessly, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Clara discovered that Samuel had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. Samuel discovered that Clara sang while she worked, not always in tune but with such joy that it made him smile. They learned each other's bodies with growing confidence and passion, the physical side of their marriage becoming as strong as the emotional connection. One evening in late summer, about 6 months after their wedding, Clara and Samuel sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the growing dark. Clara had been feeling strange all day, slightly nauseous and tired. Suddenly, the realization hit her like a thunderbolt. "Samuel," she said quietly, "I think I might be pregnant." Samuel nearly dropped his coffee cup. What, are you sure? Not completely, but my monthly time is late and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. I should go see Doc Henderson to be certain. Samuel set down his cup and pulled Clara into his arms, his face breaking into the widest smile she had ever seen. A baby. We are going to have a baby. If I am right, Clara cautioned, but she was smiling too, caught up in his excitement. The next day they rode to town together to see Doc Henderson. After examining Clara, the elderly doctor confirmed what she had suspected. She was about 2 months along, the baby due in early spring. Congratulations to you both, Doc Henderson said warmly. Clara, you are healthy and strong. I do not foresee any problems, but you need to take it a bit easier. No more lifting heavy things or overworking yourself. Samuel immediately became protective, insisting Clara rest more, trying to take on more of the physical labor himself. Clara had to remind him several times that she was pregnant, not fragile, but she was secretly touched by his concern. As her belly grew over the following months, Samuel would talk to the baby every night, his hand resting on Clara's stomach, telling their child about the farm and the animals and how loved it would be. Clara would run her fingers through his hair and feel so full of love she thought her heart might burst. They prepared the small bedroom that Samuel had been using, transforming it into a nursery. Clara sewed baby clothes from fabric Samuel bought in town, while he built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth and carving their initials into the headboard along with the baby's expected birth year. 1880. Winter settled over the farm, and they spent the long evenings by the fire, making plans for the future. Samuel wanted to expand the cattle operation, maybe buy the adjoining property if it ever came up for sale. Clara wanted to start breeding horses, thought there might be good money in selling trained mounts to the cavalry. We are going to need help soon, Samuel said one night. With the baby coming and the farm growing, it is too much for just the two of us. I have been thinking the same thing, Clara agreed. Maybe we could hire a couple of hands come spring. Good workers are hard to find, but we can afford it now. The farm that had been on the verge of foreclosure was now profitable and growing. Together, Clara and Samuel had accomplished what she could never have done alone. In early March, Clara woke in the middle of the night with cramping pains. Samuel rode through the darkness to fetch Doc Henderson and Mrs. Wright, who had experience with births. The labor was long and difficult, but Clara bore it with the same determination she brought to everything. Samuel stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. Finally, as dawn broke over the farm, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry that made Samuel laugh with relief and joy. Doc Henderson cleaned the baby and handed him to Clara, who looked down at the tiny face and felt love more fierce and overwhelming than anything she had ever experienced. "He is perfect," she whispered. Samuel, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, wrapped his arms around both of them. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Clara knew. "Thomas," she said. "Thomas James Zachary, for your father and mine." Samuel nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. He kissed Clara's forehead, then gently touched his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around Samuel's thumb, and Samuel made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Welcome to the world, Thomas," he whispered. "Welcome home." The months after Thomas's birth were exhausting but joyful. Clara had never imagined she could feel such love, such completeness. Watching Samuel with their son made her fall even more deeply in love with her husband. He was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings, walking the floor when Thomas was fussy, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. They hired 2 ranch hands that spring, young men from town looking for steady work. With the extra help, the farm continued to expand. Samuel bought more cattle and Clara started her horse breeding program with 2 good mares and a fine stallion. On their first anniversary, Samuel surprised Clara with a gift. He had been working with a lawyer in Salt Lake City for months, and now he presented her with legal documents that put the farm entirely in her name with provisions that it would pass to their children. Even in death, he had ensured that her family's legacy would be protected. "I want you to always feel secure," Samuel told her. "This is your family's land and it always will be." Clara cried and held him tight, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness and love. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The farm prospered under their joint stewardship. Thomas grew from infant to toddler, taking his first steps in the barn while they worked, saying his first word, which was "Papa," much to Samuel's delight and Clara's mock indignation. When Thomas was 2, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Samuel was even more protective, having been through it once before and remembering how difficult the labor had been. But Clara assured him she was fine, and indeed, this pregnancy seemed easier than the first. Their daughter was born in the autumn of 1882, an easier birth than Thomas had been. She had Clara's dark hair and Samuel's gray eyes, and they named her Mary Catherine, for both their mothers. Samuel proved just as devoted to his daughter as his son. Clara would often find him sitting in the rocker with Mary, reading to her from his books even though she was too young to understand the words. Thomas, now a sturdy 3-year-old, loved his little sister fiercely, always wanting to help take care of her. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The farm became one of the most successful operations in the territory. Samuel's cattle breeding program produced some of the finest stock in Utah, and Clara's horses were in high demand. They hired more help, built a new barn, expanded the house to include more bedrooms and a proper parlor. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the animals. Mary was wild and adventurous, always climbing things and getting into mischief. When Mary was 3, Clara gave birth to twin boys, Robert and Daniel, who added even more chaos and joy to the household. Through it all, Clara and Samuel's love only deepened. They still made time for each other, still talked late into the night after the children were asleep, still looked at each other across the dinner table with the same affection and desire they had felt in those early days. One evening, when Thomas was 10 and the twins were 5, the family gathered on the porch as was their custom after dinner. The children were playing in the yard, and Clara sat beside Samuel on the porch swing he had built. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Clara asked quietly. Samuel knew what she meant. "Every day. If I had ridden past that first time, if you had said no, if things had gone any other way." "I was so angry when you first showed up," Clara admitted. "I thought you were a vulture circling, waiting to pick the bones of my failure." Samuel smiled. "And I was a crazy man who proposed to a woman I barely knew. Best decision I ever made, saying yes to that crazy proposal," Clara said. "Second best decision I ever made," Samuel countered. "What was the first? Paying your debt and giving us both a chance at this life." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children play in the golden evening light. Thomas was teaching the twins how to rope a fence post, while Mary was trying to catch fireflies in a jar. "I never thought I could be this happy," Clara said softly. "After my parents died, after I got that foreclosure notice, I thought my life was over. I thought I had failed at everything that mattered." "You did not fail," Samuel said firmly. "You fought with everything you had. You just needed a partner to fight alongside you." "I needed you," Clara corrected. "Specifically you. I do not think this would have worked with anyone else." Samuel kissed the top of her head. "I rode into Beaver looking for land. I found a home instead." More years passed. Thomas grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. At 18, he was already running much of the day-to-day operations, showing a natural gift for leadership and animal husbandry. Mary, at 16, was beautiful and spirited, still climbing trees and riding horses as fast as any boy, much to the concern of the local mothers who thought she should be learning to be more ladylike. The twins, Robert and Daniel, were 12 and inseparable, always getting into adventures and mischief. They wanted to be cowboys, riding the range and having adventures, though Clara suspected they would eventually settle into ranch life like their older brother. The farm had grown to over 200 acres, with a substantial house, multiple barns, and outbuildings. They employed 6 full-time ranch hands and seasonal workers during busy times. The Zachary Ranch was known throughout the territory for quality cattle and horses. Clara, now in her early 40s, still worked on the ranch every day, though she had finally learned to delegate some tasks. She ran the business side of things, managing accounts and contracts while Samuel oversaw the livestock operations. Together, they had built something remarkable. One afternoon, Clara was in the office going over the books when Samuel came in, dusty from riding the range. He poured himself water from the pitcher and sat across from her. "Thomas wants to talk to us tonight after dinner," Samuel said. "He seemed nervous about something." Clara looked up from the ledger. "Do you think he is in trouble?" "Not our Thomas, but he has been riding over to the right place a lot lately." Clara's eyes widened. "You do not think he is interested in Emma, right, do you?" Samuel smiled. "She is a lovely girl and close to his age." Would it be so strange? That evening, after the dinner dishes were cleared, Thomas asked if he could speak with his parents privately. They went to the parlor, and Clara could see her son was indeed nervous, turning his hat in his hands. "What is it, son?" Samuel asked gently. Thomas took a deep breath. "I want to ask Emma right to marry me, but I wanted your blessing first." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. Her little boy, grown into a man, ready to start his own family. "Does she know you are going to ask?" Samuel said. "We have talked about it." "She feels the same way I do. But I want to do this properly, ask her father's permission, ask for your blessing." Samuel stood and clapped his son on the shoulder. "You have my blessing, Thomas. Emma is a fine young woman, and I think you two will be very happy together." Clara hugged her son tightly. "Your father and I married quickly, but we built something real and lasting. If you and Emma love each other, that is all that matters." Thomas married Emma right in a ceremony much larger than his parents had been, with half the territory in attendance. The young couple moved into a small house. Samuel and Clara built on the eastern edge of the property, and Thomas continued working the ranch while Emma kept house and helped Clara with the business accounts. Mary, to everyone's surprise, announced at 17 that she wanted to attend normal school in Salt Lake City to become a teacher. Samuel, remembering his own youthful dreams of teaching, supported her completely and made arrangements for her to stay with his sister's family while she studied. The twins eventually did become cowboys of sorts, working cattle drives in the summers and coming home for winters. They were skilled riders and ropers, and they loved the adventure and freedom of the open range. As Clara and Samuel entered their 50s, they gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, letting Thomas take over management. They still helped where needed, but they also took time to enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Clara and Samuel rode out to the spot by the river where they had shared so many picnics over the years. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching the water flow past. "You remember the day I asked you to marry me," Samuel said. Every detail, Clara replied. I thought you were insane. I was insane. Proposing to a woman I barely knew, offering to give up everything I had saved for a chance at something I could not even name. And yet here we are, 30 years later, Clara said softly. 4 children, 2 grandchildren on the way, a ranch that employs a dozen people. Not a bad result for an insane gamble. Samuel took her hand, his thumb tracing the calluses that never quite went away despite easier years. Best gamble I ever took. Clara, you have made my life richer than I ever dreamed possible, not because of the ranch or the money or any of that, because of who you are, because of the life we built together. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. When you paid that debt and asked me to marry you, I thought you were offering me charity. I did not understand that you were offering me partnership, love, a future. I am so grateful I was brave enough to say yes. You have always been brave, Samuel said. That is one of the things I love most about you. They sat together as the sun set. 2 people who had started as desperate strangers and became partners, lovers, best friends. The farm that had nearly been lost to foreclosure now thrived under multiple generations. The love that had started as a crazy gamble had grown into something deep and unshakable. As darkness fell, they packed up their picnic and rode home together, where their family waited. Thomas and Emma were there for dinner, along with Mary, who was visiting from Salt Lake City, and the twins, home from their latest cattle drive adventure. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. Clara looked around the table at her family, at the home she and Samuel had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had almost lost everything once, had been so close to the edge of despair. Then a stranger had ridden into her life and changed everything with a simple question. Will you marry me? The best answer she had ever given. Years continued to pass in gentle progression. Emma gave birth to 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, who filled the ranch with new energy and joy. Clara and Samuel became beloved grandparents, always available for stories and horseback rides and sneaking extra sweets when the parents were not looking. Mary finished her education and took a teaching position in Beaver, eventually marrying a kind lawyer named James and having 2 children of her own. The twins finally settled down in their late 20s, each marrying local girls and starting families, though they still worked the ranch with their brother Thomas. The Zachary ranch became something of a legend in the territory. People spoke of how Clara Jenkins had nearly lost her family's farm to foreclosure, only to have a mysterious cowboy pay her debt and marry her, and how together they had built an empire. Young couples starting out would sometimes come asking for advice, wanting to know the secret of their success. Hard work, Samuel would always say, and finding the right partner to work alongside, and being brave enough to take a chance on something that seems impossible, Clara would add, smiling at her husband. On their 40th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a massive celebration. All 4 children were there with their spouses and children. Friends and neighbors came from all over the territory. There was music and dancing and more food than could possibly be eaten. As Clara and Samuel danced together under strings of lanterns hung in the yard, their grandchildren running and playing all around them, Clara felt like the luckiest woman alive. 40 years, she said softly. Can you believe it? Best 40 years of my life, Samuel replied, pulling her closer. His hair was gray now, his face lined with age and weather, but his eyes still held that same steady warmth that had made her trust him all those years ago. Mine too, Clara said. Every single day of them. They danced slowly, ignoring the faster tempo of the fiddle music, lost in their own rhythm. Around them, their legacy lived and breathed. Children and grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a community built on hard work and love. As the party continued late into the night, Clara and Samuel finally slipped away to the porch of the farmhouse, the same porch where they had sat together thousands of times over the decades. They sat on the swing Samuel had built 25 years ago, gently rocking, watching the celebration. "I need to tell you something," Samuel said quietly. Clara looked at him, hearing something serious in his tone. "What is it?" "I have been having some pain in my chest lately. Doc Henderson says my heart is weakening. He does not know how much time I have, could be years or could be months." Clara's breath caught. After 40 years together, the thought of losing him was unbearable. "Samuel," he took her hand gently. "Do not look so worried. I have lived a full life, Clara, more than full. I got to build a life with the woman I love, raise 4 wonderful children, see grandchildren grow. I have no regrets." "I am not ready to lose you," Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And I am not planning on going anywhere soon," Samuel assured her. "But when the time comes, whenever that is, I want you to know something. That day I rode up to your farm, I was not just looking for land. I was looking for purpose, for meaning, for a reason to stop drifting. You gave me all of that and more. You gave me a home, not just a place but a feeling. You gave me love and partnership and a reason to wake up grateful every single morning." Clara leaned against him, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Promise me something," Samuel continued. "When I am gone, do not let it break you. You are strong, Clara. You were strong before I met you, and you will be strong after. Keep living, keep loving our family, keep building. That is what would make me happy." "I promise," Clara managed to say, "but you have to promise me something too. Fight to stay with me as long as you can. I am not ready to say goodbye." "I promise," Samuel said, kissing her forehead. "Every day I have left is yours." Samuel lived for 3 more years after that conversation. He slowed down gradually, spending more time with the grandchildren, teaching them everything he knew about ranching and life. He made sure Thomas was fully prepared to run the operation, pass down his knowledge and wisdom. On a quiet spring morning, with wildflowers blooming across the fields and new calves running in the pastures, Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep, Clara beside him. He was 70 years old, and he died in the home he loved, surrounded by family. The funeral was one of the largest Beaver had ever seen. People came from all over Utah and beyond, ranchers and business people and friends whose lives Samuel had touched. They spoke of his integrity, his kindness, his skill as a rancher, and his devotion as a husband and father. Clara grieved deeply, but she kept her promise. She did not let the loss break her. She continued working on the ranch, spending time with her children and grandchildren, living the life she and Samuel had built together. On hard days, she would ride out to the river and sit by the water, feeling close to him there. She lived another 15 years as a widow, watching her grandchildren grow up and start families of their own. She saw the ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's management, saw Mary become a respected educator in the community, saw the twins finally settle into family life while still maintaining their adventurous spirits. Clara Jenkins Zachary passed away at the age of 77, surrounded by 4 generations of her family. She died in the farmhouse her grandfather had built, the home she had fought so hard to keep, the place where she had found love and built a legacy. At her funeral, Thomas stood up to speak about his mother. He talked about her strength and determination, how she had faced foreclosure with courage and taken a chance on a stranger that changed everything. He talked about the partnership she and Samuel had modeled, showing all their children what true love and mutual respect looked like. "My mother could have given up when times got hard," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. She could have walked away from this farm and started over somewhere else, but she believed in this land, in the legacy her family had built. And when a cowboy stranger rode up and offered her a chance to keep fighting, she was brave enough to say yes. He gestured around at the gathered crowd, the huge family that had grown from Clara and Samuel's union. All of us exist because 46 years ago, my father paid a debt and asked one question, and my mother was brave enough to answer. They taught us that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every day. A choice to work together, to build together, to face whatever comes as partners. The family buried Clara next to Samuel in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch. Their matching headstones bore simple inscriptions with their names, dates, and a single phrase. Together they built a legacy of love. The ranch continued for generations, always kept in the family, always managed with the same principles of hard work, integrity, and partnership that Clara and Samuel had established. Their story became family legend, told to each new generation as an example of courage, love, and the power of taking chances. The farmhouse still stood, renovated and expanded over the decades, but with the original structure preserved. The great-great-grandchildren of Clara and Samuel would run through its halls, play in its yards, and learn to ride horses in its pastures, never knowing how close it all came to being lost. But the older family members remembered. They remembered the story of how a young woman facing foreclosure took a gamble on a stranger. How that stranger proved worthy of her trust. How together they built not just a successful ranch, but a family, a community, a love story that transcended the ordinary. On quiet evenings when the work was done, and the family gathered on the porch of the old farmhouse, they would sometimes talk about Clara and Samuel, about his crazy proposal and her brave acceptance, about 46 years of partnership and love, about a legacy that continued to grow and flourish generations later. And they would look out over the land that nearly became someone else's property, at the fields and pastures and buildings that represented decades of combined labor and love, and they would be grateful. Grateful for a stranger who rode into Beaver, Utah in 1879 and paid a debt he did not owe. Grateful for a woman brave enough to say yes to an impossible question. Grateful for a love story that started with foreclosure and ended with a legacy that would last forever. The story of Clara and Samuel Zachary became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love, courage, and partnership. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the chances we are brave enough to take, the hands we are willing to reach out and grasp, the impossible questions we dare to answer with yes. In the end, it all came down to that single moment in a hotel dining room in Beaver, when a cowboy asked a question and a desperate young woman chose hope over fear, partnership over pride, love over loneliness. Will you marry me? Yes. One question. One answer. A lifetime of love and legacy built on the foundation of two people, brave enough to believe in possibilities.